Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and right here on the desk we have a Xbox One X. So this is not my console, this is actually a friend of mine. His name is Adam Korlick. He sent over this Xbox One to me because we talked about upgrading the internal drive on this, which I've already done. I've opened it up, I've replaced the internal drive, configured it, and closed all up, but I didn't do any cleaning on here because I wanted to make this tutorial. So this is kind of just going to be hopefully some tips and tricks and some other helpful stuff to show you all how to disassemble an Xbox One X, replace a thermal paste, clean it up in some places, and then put it all back together. Because I have been taking these apart here pretty recently, and there's a few things that I just want to clarify in the process here that I didn't see before. So if this helps out people, that's absolutely fantastic. So for this process, before you get started, before you go crazy taking apart your Xbox One, just know if you break something, it's on you. And then let's get to the actual parts that we need. So first of all, we need to actually get into this system, and the primary two things we will need are going to be a T8 security bit screwdriver and a T10 security bit screwdriver, also known as T8H or T10H. I'm actually going to be using my iFixit Pro toolkit, which has those two and many more in here. Next up, we're also going to need something. I'm going to cheat here a little bit. It's a completely legitimate method, but there's just a whole other piece here. There's going to be a X-clamp inside of here, and if you've taken apart an Xbox 360, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's kind of cool that it actually transcended to the Xbox One, but either way, that's besides the point here. I'm going to be using the Team Executor. I think it's just the X-clamp removal tool. That's what it's called. I've had one of these. I've used it for years. I don't think Team Executor makes them, but they're definitely cloned out there. You can get them for a few bucks, and if you're going to be taking apart a few Xboxes, Xbox 360s or Xbox Ones, that's it specifically, this thing is going to help you out so much. So we're going to use this to take apart the X-clamp and remove it properly. Then, of course, since we're going to be repasting, you're going to need some new thermal paste. I'm going to be using MX4. A lot of people are going to say which is better, which is best. I use MX4, it works for me. As long as it works well, that's fine. And of course we need something to remove the thermal paste, the old stuff from the heatsink and the APU itself. So I'm going to be opting for Arctic Clean. I've just been using this stuff for years, it works well. There's so many other different things you can use. If you want to use isopropyl alcohol or whatever there is, you're more than welcome to. And this is not pictured, but I'm also going to be using paper towels to clean up the excess on there. So let's go ahead and move all the stuff that we don't need and get to the Xbox One itself. Now, there's, again, a few specific things that I want to show, so I'm probably going to be moving the camera quite a bit, but let's just get into this, all right? So first of all, let's turn the system around, and there's going to be two T10 screws that we need to get to. The first one is going to be to the left, and the second one is going to be to the right. Now, if you're looking at this on a Xbox One X that has never been opened, this is going to be covered by a small black sticker. That's going to be the warranty sticker, just showing that you've never gotten into the system, but you will have to void your warranty, so to speak, and remove that to get in there. So just remove that black sticker, and then remove these two T10 screws. That's going to be easy enough. Alright, so our first thing is going to be to remove this top cover. As you can see, it slides off. So what I like to do is, from this side, start pulling up, and it just comes up like that. And again, just look at this. Like, you barely slide it off, and you come here, you remove this, you might have to apply a little bit of pressure, but there we go, it comes off like that. And then, kind of just a bit of a slide and drop off like that. Just something along those lines. And there we go, the top cover has now pretty easily come off. I need to clean this up as well too, clean up the inside, but you know, let's get to the rest of the system here. So now we need a T8 screwdriver, the T8H security bit, and there's going to be 1, 2, 3 screws right here we need to remove. Remember that these two silver screws need to be on the left and middle, and the right is going to have a black screw. And it's always going to be good to separate them out as well too. So the 2 case screws I have separated. These 3 I'm going to have separated into their own section. Just keep those in mind. So now this part comes off pretty easily. There's going to be this tab that you want to be careful with, but just kind of gently pop this off here. And there we go. So now just put this to the side. Next is another 3 T8 screws. One here, one here, one here. This one here you'll need to be a little bit more careful with. Again, we're just going to gently pull this because the connector's behind here. So we're going to gently disconnect that, but don't rip it off because you're going to see there is a ribbon right here. So there is this little clasp that's holding it down. You just need to very gently release that. You can use either your fingernail or something else. And then just gently pull that off, leave that ribbon as is. That's our second board that we need to keep to the side. All right, so now we have all these screws that are available. Almost all of them are going to be T10 with the exception of these 2 screws, as well as these 4 screws around the X clamp, which is obviously annotated with an X. So let's go ahead and get our T10 bit out and start removing these. By the way, once you start removing them, all of these short screws are going to be interchangeable with any other short screws, aside from obviously the black ones and these 2 on the side. When you start getting to the long screws such as this, again, they're going to be interchangeable with any of the other 6 long screws that you will find. I guess 5 more at this point here, and you really can't mix these up here. Like, these long screws are not going to get into where the short screws will be, and then even vice versa here. If you put a short screw in where you put your long screw, it's just going to fall down like that. So you don't really have to worry about messing that up. Alright, so there we go. All of those screws have been removed. We now just have the T8 ones left. And I'm actually going to keep these ones in place right now because some people might be watching this who just want to do something like a hard drive upgrade, or maybe they need to do something with their Blu-ray drive. And with that, you don't have to remove these if you're going to be doing only that. So I'm only going to remove those when we need to get to it. But for now, I'm going to now go to the T8 and remove these 2 screws. Alright, so for this here, what we need to do is just gently remove that. As you can see, there is a connector right here. And now we can take this part of the console out, so we're going to be getting rid of the plastic bottom. For this, what I choose to do is kind of pull up here from the back, holding onto the, if you can see it there, the black plastic. Kind of pull up and then pull out like that. And there we go. We now do not need the black bottom plastic piece, so let's get rid of this. This will be cleaned, of course. And for anyone who does not know, now you know, I guess, the Xbox One X is built upside down. So even though this is right side up for how you would use the console, this is the bottom of the motherboard, the Blu-ray drive is right there, and we now need to flip it over. So even though the console is upside down, it is technically right side up, I guess. But there's going to be 2 screws we need to remove. There's going to be a flat screw right here, like the top of it will be flat. And there's going to be one of the more round ones that we see here. So just remember that if you want to keep the screws in the same place. And these are going to be T10 screws. Alright, so with those 2 screws removed, you can kind of start from here, pull up gently, kind of pull back around like that, an angle, and there you go. So now we are closer to the components that we need. The Blu-ray drive just kind of lifts up like this, and if we pull it back around right there, it's connecting underneath the power supply. So the first component that we can get to here is going to be the hard drive. You're going to see a hard drive on yours if it's never been opened. This one has previously been upgraded, of course, by myself, like 30 minutes prior. So this has a SSD in here, but you're going to see the power connector as well as the SATA connector. And you're just going to need to remove these 2 wires, and then you can remove this entire assembly with the drive. So here we go, check this out. If you're ever wanting to do a hard drive upgrade, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. This of course is going to be the component that we cannot get off of here unless we take everything apart. And if you look at the bottom, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 giant screws right here, and 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that go into the actual drive itself. Well, guess what? You can save yourself about half the time. So part of the plastic here is just to secure the drive, like the actual hard drive itself, because it has spinning platters and all that stuff. So you actually want to secure it in place, right? But if you're just going to be swapping out the drive, you can actually get away with only removing 4 of the screws, and they're going to be the ones in the cornermost screws, the locations there. So you can remove the drive. I'll show you that real quick. These are also T10, by the way. All of them are T10. Alright, so I've only removed those 4 screws, but look at this. The entire plastic assembly comes off, and now for the actual SATA connector component, you just pull off like that, and now you have unfiltered access to the actual drive itself, so you can swap it out, you can image it, do whatever you need to on there. Congratulations. So that's all we need on that, and again, it's just saved you 4 screws right there. So we'll just put this to the side, because I'll save this for reassembly. Alright, so let's try and get to that power supply, and to do that, we're kind of doing that so we can get to the Blu-ray drive and properly disconnect it and, you know, replace it if you ever need to. So here, of course, we have the Blu-ray drive. It is still connected in that little corner. I wouldn't try to recommend pulling that out there, but we need to kind of just pull up on the power supply. So hold down here, pull up on the power supply like so, and it has become disconnected. And now at this point, if you can see, you can kind of just gently move that around. So we can just yank up gently on that. Just be careful with the components around here so you don't knock anything off. And there you go. So that is the Blu-ray drive in case you ever need to access it. I'm going to put that over to the side. So there we go. That's if you want to get to the hard drive and the Blu-ray drive. Easy enough. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to gently pop this back into place here, because I want to remove those other 4 screws. And this is if you're going to get really dirty in the system here. You're wanting to open up the, just get over to this point here and, you know, repaste the CPU, do whatever you need to, or APU, excuse me. So at this point, I'm actually going to flip the console upside down yet again and remove those black screws. Pretty self-explanatory. 1, 2, 3, 4 black T8 screws. Screwdriver to screw, remove it. So there we go, all 4 screws have been removed. We can gently flip this back over and commence with the rest of the stuff we need to here. I'd also recommend while we're here, where you see the fan connected to the motherboard, just go ahead, hold this down, and disconnect it like so. And as you can see, that's all coming pretty loose, pretty easily now. So we'll kind of have to do a little bit of a thing here. We're going to disconnect the power supply. Now this, don't throw it away, just keep this still intact here, but this is just going to secure down the power plug itself, and you can kind of just gently remove like that. Keep your power supply over to the side, and now we need to remove the actual fan assembly itself. For this, I'd recommend come to the side here and disconnect it kind of like that. There we go. So there. At this point, we removed the whole fan assembly, and we have unfiltered access to the power plug, which just comes off like that. So there we go, we've pretty much removed almost everything we need to at this point. So now you have access to the motherboard itself here, well, almost full access. I'd recommend gently pulling out the motherboard, just like that, and secure it with the heatsink there. And then you can remove this. As you can see there, that pad should be there, that's fine. That's where that's going to be, no worries on that. So awesome, we now have access to the board itself, but we need to get underneath here to actually repaste everything that we need. So what you'll need to do is gently flip this over, and this is exactly what I was talking about, and I'm sure anybody who has messed with Xbox 360s is having some vivid nightmares right now looking at this. And the X-clamp, trust me, it's not all that hard to remove as long as you have something like this. Again, this is the X-clamp removal tool. So I brought this from the 360 over to the Xbox One X with me, and this is what we're going to be using to remove this. So first, just to keep everything the same, I like to remember the orientation this was originally on as stock. So I'd remember something like this is the side of the motherboard, and that white spot was on the left, just to keep that in mind. And now let's go ahead and remove this. So I'm going to show you all from the furthest angle here, essentially what you want to do if you're going to follow along with the same thing. This is the X-clamp, and it's on a screw, I guess for lack of a better terms, that is kind of grooved in there. So you don't want to go completely underneath. You don't want to touch the motherboard at all. That's not what you're going to do. You're kind of going to slot it in there, like so. There we go. And it took a little bit of force, but that's how it works. And then at that point, you can kind of just hold down on here with a little bit of pressure from your thumb and pull upwards. That's it. So one of them has been removed. Next up, you can come over here. I'm going to show you again. You slot it in like so. You can get a much better angle of it right here. You see where that is? You slot it in, hold down, pull up. That's it. So now we have one more to do. I'm going to show you all slowly. Just like that. Even if we need it, we might not even need it here, in all honesty. Let me go with the other one. If any of them give you issues, you can always just go to another. But just like that, come here. See, that one was a lot easier. And there we go. So everything looks good there. I'm just going to gently move this over to the side. And now we can actually remove the heatsink itself. Flip over the board. I guess if you've never done this before, my recommendation is firm but gentle on this. You can hold down the motherboard a little bit if you want to. Now I already loosened it a tiny bit, which isn't that hard to do. But you can kind of just hold it down, pull up gently, and that's it. There we go. So that is the component that we were trying to get to this entire time. So now we're going to need to clean this mess up. And we're also going to need to clean this mess up. And all the pads we don't need to touch right now, those are fine. If you really want to replace them, that's totally okay, but I'm just going to be replacing the paste itself, nothing else really. And I will say, thankfully, the nice thing is with this motherboard is actually in pretty pristine condition. Like, it has that nice shine to it. I'm not even worried about it being dirty, so I'm not even going to worry about that. But if your motherboard is dirty, you can definitely blow it with some air, like compressed air, something like that. But let's go ahead and get to this here. All right, so everybody has their own little different way of doing this, and for this, again, I use the Arctic Clean Remover first of all. Let it sit on there for a little bit, and then use Q-tips to clean it up. And you just want to be real careful because, I mean, look at all those little tiny components sitting on this chip. So let's go ahead, and this is typically how I might apply it here. Let's just see. So a little bit of this is going to go a long way. That's why I'm really only doing like one dot at a time. And I'm going to kind of start getting it off of the die itself so we can start really breaking apart that solid stuff. And there. So I normally let this sit for like a minute or two on here and then start cleaning it up. And again, I use Q-tips for this. I'm actually going to load up on more Q-tips here. All right, I'd say that's good so far. This is not going to be a one and done process, by the way. You're going to have to clean up and reapply a few times to fully get the old stuff off. So let's just go ahead and start removing this. All right, so this is an example here. Could have done better, but I got a good chunk of it off the die itself, but I'm still not seeing a mirror finish on there, and that's what we're looking for. So let's just apply more on here and try again. Alright, so on our second pass, that is looking better. Right here to the bottom, to the left, I got pretty much all of it out. The die is looking better, but there's still some on the components themselves. They're just the rest of it. So let's try it again. Alright, so there we go. That is about it for that. Pretty much all of it is removed, but I'm the type of person when I do this, I like to make sure all of it's removed and then do it one more time. So I'm going to do one last time with the remover. So there we go. I could tell this is done because my Q-tips were coming back clear and no longer gray or, you know, near black. So everything is completely removed. And what I like to do at this point is I kind of like to take a bit of a paper towel and just very lightly, I'm barely putting any pressure here, but just very lightly dab this. Just to get off any excess, I mean, maybe not all of it, but at least a good amount. And now if you're panicking because like at certain angles it's still kind of gross looking, it doesn't look completely clean, that's totally fine. We just wanted to get the old stuff removed, and now that's what the purifier is going to be for if you're using art to clean. So it's just going to be about the exact same thing as before. You know, just put some on, let it sit for a minute or two, and then clean it up. Alright, so that's looking much better now, and I like to go over with the purifier one more time, so even when it gets to a point where I'm like, that looks good, I'll still do it one more time. Alright, so here, this is probably where you will see more of the benefit itself, but again, I kind of just dab this a little bit if I can, go all around it. Really not picking up much, but that is looking nicer. So it's pretty much at the point where we want it. Again, we're looking for a mere finish is what they call it. So that's looking good. I'm not worried about the motherboard now at this point. But let's go ahead and do the same thing to the heatsink. Alright, so for the heatsink here, you might have a lot more goop built up on this one. And actually what I'm going to do, to save some effort at least, I'm actually just going to physically remove the really heavy stuff here. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a spudger I have in my kit, kind of just gently going over it, like barely applying any pressure here. And as you can see, all those huge chunks have gotten removed. So now I'm just going to wipe this down and remove these from the heatsink. And that will at least save us a lot of effort, or save the art to clean a lot of effort there. Because we still want to make sure our heatsink is nice and clean for application. Even though you're seeing, I mean, it's kind of flaking off, so I gotta collect a lot of it. But look at that, even without taking any liquid to it, we've pretty much removed most of this, which is good. So there we go. With that, the heatsink is going to be easier, but I've removed most of it already, just dry removal really. And I'm going to do the same thing here with the art clean. So again, the first step is the remover. Just let it sit there for a little bit, maybe a minute or two, and then clean it off. Since this is also a much bigger and much flatter surface, I'm just going to use paper towels for this. I'm not going to do the Q-tips on here, so just take your paper towel and start cleaning it off. That's about all there was to it. I'm gonna go over it one more time just because I said I would. Alright, so there was barely any effort that was needed there, and I'm going to do the same thing here now with the purifier. Just get a few drops out of it on here, spread it around a bit, then wipe it down. And one more time, just because I said I would here. Like I said, I guess my thing is typically I will look at it and clean it up until I think it is good, and then when I think it's good, I do it one more time. Alright, so there we go, that's it. Now this is not going to look nearly as shiny just because that's not how it works, but congratulations, that is all done at this point. So now I'd also recommend going in and cleaning up, you know, just take some compressed air or something and clean out your heatsink, your fan, any of that other fun stuff that you're going to do now. I'm actually going to kind of run downstairs and do that just to the components, blow them with air a bit before we start the reassembly process. Alright, so at this point everything internally has been cleaned to my liking, to a point that I'm happy with. All the dust has been blown out and all that fun stuff. So now we get to repaste this. And for the thermal paste, if you've never done this before, you're only going to be applying it to the die. And because this is rectangular, what I do is I kind of just like to do a line down here. So this is going to be kind of a point of contention because Everybody has their own way of applying thermal paste and saying why it's the best method, how it's the best method, all that stuff. I'm going to tell you all what I do here. I'm just going to apply a line down here, and then I'm going to put the heatsink down on there. I'm not going to spread it manually. I'm going to put the heatsink on it, and once you tighten it up and tension everything, gravity and science are going to spread it for you at that point. It works just fine. So that's why we're going to do that. So for this, I'm just going to come over here. So something like that will be fine. So let's work on getting this all popped back on here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to remove the power supply, or not the power supply, the motherboard, put the CPU heatsink down here, I'm going to put it upside down, and I'm going to lay the motherboard on top of it. So the reason why I'm doing this is so I can line up all the holes with all these screws here, which I'm going to attempt to do, and you want to make sure it's really not going to be touching anything. So I'm doing this at an angle, hold on. So there we go. Once we find all the screws, we can just gently lower it down. There we go. And now we're going to put the X clamp on. And remember, I had made a point to remember where this goes, but this is now upside down. So I'm going to flip it around this way. And now let's go ahead and apply the X clamp. So for reapplication of the X clamp, first you want to hook it on to any of the four here, and that will be fine. Still want to be gentle with this. So kind of hook that on. And actually you could hook it on to 2 with no issue. Then I'm going to come over here, and this is what you do. In a way, you need to slot this in, kind of pull up, use the pressure, and do the reverse. So you thread it back on, so to speak. And we're going to do the exact same thing right here. Slot it in, pull up, apply pressure, bring it down. So there we go. So at that point, with it all well, we're almost done here. Once we end up putting it back into the chassis and we screw it in, it should be all good. But yeah, so the X clamp is back on, the thing that so many people end up fighting. It didn't take that long. All right, so here we go, rebuilding time. We have the bottom of the console, technically the top. This is so confusing. It's either the bottom or the top. I don't know. This is where the motherboard goes facing down. Either way, you take your motherboard, you want to make sure all the ports in the back are going to line up, and you gently bring it down. And there we go. You can also check around all the sides, all that fun stuff, but I do know that this is all good at this point. Thank goodness. And if you want to do an extra job of securing it down, at this point you can actually flip the console upside down, go over to where the X clamp is, right there. Make sure all the screws are lined up there, they should be, and you can actually screw this in right here, so you don't have to worry about your motherboard moving all over the place. Also, for what it's worth, I like to start at one. I mean, you have to start a corner, but go and go around, and then kind of just do the same thing, just across. Alright, and once they're screwed in, what I like to do is also just, you don't want to over tighten, but you just want to make sure if you just go in with your hand and try and screw them in, they're not going to move any further. So that one was a little bit loose. And there we go. So that's about it. Let's flip this thing over again. All right, so for the side here, first of all, what we need to do is take the power supply and get it notched in right here. Now, as you can see at the bottom, there's going to be 2 notches here, and they need to match with the ones that are down below in there. And this little plug gets really annoying. If you're not careful, this is probably going to move around all over the place and all that fun stuff. So, yeah. All right, so what we can do for this, kind of just get it in place. Might just have to look around a little bit And once you get it in there, it's fine. So there we go. It just should go in flat like that. And either if you want to use something to secure it down, or even if you want to partially screw it in from the bottom using one of the small T10 screws that goes there, you're more than welcome to. I'm actually going to do that just so it doesn't move around a ton. All right, so what I did was I just partially screwed those two in. So as you can see, I cannot pull this out there and it's still a little bit loose just because, again, if you leave it in there non-secured, it will kind of just start flying all over the place, which can get a little bit annoying. So we do have that plug in, and now we need to put the fan shroud on here. So go ahead, take your fan shroud, kind of just pop it on like so, notches in pretty easily. You're going to see right here in the corner, this is where the power supply, at least the cables here, are going to loop through. So you put those two on, and it's going to go on a little something like that. There we go. We don't want to fully secure the power supply yet because we have to hook up the DVD drive. However, while we are here, we can come back around to the front. Everything should be looking good. We can take our fan, hook it up to the motherboard, so that means when we turn on the console, the fan will actually turn on to cool it down. What do you think of that? So let's go ahead and take our internal drive as well, because that will be easy enough to pop in there. Now, I did do this before, where I took off the plastic parts, and I'm just going to, I was putting it on upside down, would you look at that? So it's just going to go on just like that, just fine. And it just sits in there, it's notched and everything, it will fit. But I'm just going to take the 4 screws I removed and screw them back into place for our drive. Alright, so with that in place here, we can take our drive, and again, just make sure it fits into place. There are holes inside of this here, which are going to show where it goes. So you can kind of just take it, get it lined up properly, and you want to make sure it's going to sit in there mostly flush. And if it's not like perfectly, I mean, if it's not sitting like perfectly flat in there, that's going to be fine as well too, because when we screw it in, it's going to resolve that in a way at least. So it's mainly going to be these 2 corners that you make sure you're not going to get much movement in, because there's going to be 2 plastic notches underneath that do need to feed through. I'll actually remove this and show you. It's going to be this raised plastic notch and this one here, and they have to feed through. So that's what you're aiming for, and you're kind of trying to look for it and you're trying to feel for it in a way. I got the one in this corner here, but this one I just need to pop in. There we go, something like that. And by the way, when you hook up all these cables again, make sure they're going to be going in the right way. You're going to have to look a little bit closer, but as you can see right here, they're only supposed to go one way. Make sure you don't flip them around. So be very careful and just observant when you're plugging them into these plugs. All right, and now we need to do the same for the Blu-ray drive. So we're going to feed them underneath where the power supply goes, and this is going to be the data cable. Kind of going at sideways here. Let me just line that up a little bit nicer. There we go. And then again, check this out. I will try and zoom in here. The power is notched, so it's only supposed to go one way on the motherboard itself. Make sure you plug it in that proper way. If you plug it in upside down and force it, you're gonna fry your drive. All right, so now with the power supply, we need to connect the power supply right there into the plug on the board right there. So we simply just kind of come down on this, make sure you line it up, and it's just gonna pop in place. So that's all there is to it. Make sure this whole piece is properly affixed and taped down, and then you can take your Blu-ray drive, notch it on top of the power supply like so, and there you go. So the system is pretty, I mean, all the major components are back on here just fine. So now we need to take the other part of the chassis here and pop it on top. It's going to be this part here that we're doing it on. So I kind of find it easier to go from the back to the front. So if you do it like this, let's just kind of go around to the back of the console here. If I can show you all, you're kind of going to come right here from the back and push it down. There you go. Now, when you come around the front of the system, it is kind of going to be eating into the Blu-ray drive. At least these little pieces is what it looks like. So you just need to be a little cognizant of that. Make sure you're really not destroying them. And then everything just kind of comes down and fits real snug. So now let's go ahead and screw in the only 2 screws that we need right here, and these are the T10 screws. So the short little flat one is going to be going right here on the right, and the only other one, once I have that in place, this one that looks like all those others, at least the small T10 screws, is going to go on the left. All right, so there we go. That's looking all good. So now let's take this and we're going to put it in the bottom, the plastic bottom of the case. And we are going to have to flip this upside down, and then we're going to have to line up these 4 notches of the Blu-ray drive with the bottom of the front of the plastic of the case. You'll see what I mean here soon. So here we got the front of the case, but I'm actually going to bring it to the side here so you can look at it like that. You want to be very careful of this right here, just your ribbon. You don't want to press it, you don't want to pinch it, as well as this one too. Just be very careful and just be aware where those are at all times. So now what you're going to do is bring your console like this, and you're kind of going to stick it in here, make sure these line up with all the grooves that are required there that are matching, and then you're going to lay down the rest of the console. So I'm going to show you all as best as I can. It's going to be a little bit difficult. I kind of want to line it up, and just be careful again with the ribbon over there. All right, so what I've noticed is it kind of helps if I'm holding it so I can feel exactly where the Blu-ray drive is moving into on the plastic. There we go. I've seen it, I felt it. There you go. So that's about the best I can show you all. And what you can do now is now gently bring this into the plastic, and there you go. So everything should be lined up there just fine. Now we need to put the 2 boards on just so we don't have these hanging out everywhere. So maybe just one of the boards, it doesn't have to be both, but what I like to do here first is immediately grab this ribbon and pop it on like so. Just like that, it's going to clip on with little to no force, and those are going to be T8s. So you need to take the 2 small flat T8 screws that matched up to this, and you're just going to screw them in. So now let's attach the front board for the ribbon so we don't just have it hanging out anymore. So right here, as you can see, my clasp has been released on this, so it's ready to accept the ribbon. So for this, I'm going to zoom in a bit so y'all can see it better. And here we go. So again, I just use my fingers for this here, but kind of come down, hook it up like so, and it feeds in with no issue. And then you want to clasp it, just like that. And there you go, it is now attached. So we can now take this, kind of push the ribbon into the bottom of the console. That's it. And while we're here, if you want to, you could also screw in the board itself. So I'm just going to take, again, you want to take the 3 golden long T8 screws. They should be the only ones like that for the entire system. That's 1. Here's going to be number 2, and then the 3rd one. So this board will be nice and secure on the system itself. All right, so for the hard drive assembly, I want to focus on this real quick because this can be a little bit troublesome, just like the power supply plug. So as you can see, here's one of the notches, here's one of the other notches, but you're going to see that it's kind of recessed into itself here. But that's fine. The way you screw it in, you can actually bring it back up to the surface here and secure it. So this is how I do it, all right? First of all, you need to get your short T10 screws and of course the T10 bit and start screwing in here. So this is the best hole that I am seeing, plus it has a notch on it. So I'm just going to come right here and just screw that. You want to make sure that you have it in place well enough. And doesn't even have to be like super tight, but just secured enough there. So there's that, and you kind of want to go around here. So again, in a way, you're almost kind of, it's almost like it had an issue and you're fixing it by screwing this all back in. And this is one of the more problematic pieces, I would say, so that's why I want to focus directly in on this. But as you can see, that notch has now resurfaced. So while it has resurfaced, let's go ahead and screw this in. And look at that, that's loose, like it's going in and out of the chassis there. But that's fine, because we're going to tighten it up once we have everything proper. So here is the last screw for this. There we go. So now we can go all around and start tightening these up. So that's one. This one is loose. That's two. This one's a little bit loose. That's three. And then here is four. So there we go. The storage is back in place just fine. And since we're also focusing on problematic points, as you can see right here, this is where the power plug is, and we can just finish screwing this in here, because this one to the right was a little bit loose, and to the left, this one was just the one I kind of screwed in place. There we go. So that's fine. Those are like the two problematic points I typically find when I reassemble these consoles. Now let's do the long screws just to find where they go. So let's see, one of the long screws goes here, one of them goes right here, one of them's gonna go over here. This one you can't really see until I move it, but in the corner, that's where the fourth one will go. Number 5 is going to go down here, and number 6 is going to go over here. So that's where all of the long screws go. Now that you've found them, let's go ahead and screw them in. Alright, so we are getting nearly done. We now just have a few of the small screws left, and it's just easy. Find the empty holes here and fill them up. So there we go, all the screws on the top here have been popped back in, and we have this very last board right here, which is going to go on the left of the console. Now again, this is pretty easy, even easier. You have this tab right here, you just need to go behind the tab, and then take this connector right here, pop it in. There we go. And now this is going to be T8. So remember, these two long T8 silver screws. These are going to go in on the left and in the middle. And now the small black T8 screw is going to go on the right. And we have all those in. So the very last part here is going to be the top case. All right, so I just want to prelude this by saying this thing has given me so much trouble in the past because, well, I don't even have enough space right here to really show you all. Let me back this up a little bit. But here, you might think you can just come from the front, and no, you cannot. And then you might think maybe you can kind of like wiggle a little bit. No, you can't do that either. You're not going to be successful doing that. There is a way that I've seen how to do this here. I've been able to do it a few times now with little to no issue. It doesn't seem very straightforward, but this is how you get the top cover back on. All right, so I figured it's just easiest to show you all from the side here, because from the left side, you see all these grooves right here, and you need to match up this with the grooves. So you need to take your, I'm going to try this the best I can on camera here. You need to pretty much take the case and line it up with the way that you were able to get it loose enough that it was able to release. My console is sliding a bit just because this isn't the most spacious setup, but there you go. So I don't know how well you all can see that, but essentially you're needing to take the case and kind of loop it with the grooves. So I've been able to do that, it looks like. Let me see. There we go. So now once you kind of get it behind there, it's going to slide down, and it kind of just does it on the other side as well too. Because if you look on the other side of the console, it loops down that way. So I'm going to try and show you all one more time, because I want this to be clear, if at all possible. Let's see. I was able to slide that off just fine. So this is a confusing thing. It slides off, but it cannot slide back on. So let's try this one more time together. Again, we have our black grooves right here. You see how the grooves are supposed to feed into the case right there. And you take kind of like that solid plastic piece and you feed it behind those to match up with the grooves on the bottom of the case. And there should only be about that much room on the back. So there we go. So it's hooked onto the left. And now I'm going to show you all more on the right hand side here. So on the right, everything should match up. And if done properly, you see how cleanly it lines up right there. So there we go, you all. That is about it on that. And then for the console itself, one thing I'd recommend doing is come around to the back, make sure that it is all matched up, and it looks like it is. So that was a little bit annoying because I'm like standing and trying to show and explain all this slowly here, but that is about the best I can explain it right there. You have to go around to the left, you have to loop it, like we'll kind of feed it behind the grooves, and then everything just fits and comes back in. So at this point, you just put in these last 2 black T10 screws and you're done. All right, so there you go, everyone. We have successfully conquered the Xbox One X. As you can see, I'm kind of trying to pull this off here and it doesn't come off because it's screwed back on. So that is, I half joke, but I mean, it is the truth here. The hardest part of all of this is getting the top piece back on because there's a specific method of doing it. But once you figure out how to do it, it's easy enough. It's just the first time you do it, if you don't have any documentation or video, you really stumble and it's quite difficult to figure out. So that is about it on this. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated. If you didn't like it, dislike is fine as well too. But let me know if you'd like to see some more videos like this and if this was helpful, because I know how to tear down tons of systems and put them back together, but I guess I really don't have many videos on them. I more just am doing this on the Xbox One X because I was having difficulty with it, and I want to show you all how to work through it. Anyways, for real this time, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Later, everyone.